Not that kind of stream. I don't know. Does it say when we're live?
Says we're live. I think we're live.
Oh,
I
yeah,
mean,
we are live.
are we live? Is this live?
What? I didn't know this was live.
I
Welcome,
think I'll
everyone, to the Monday live stream. As you can see, we have Alex from Secret History Living in Your Aquarium. We really don't have any topics or anything. We're just going to wing it as we go, see what happens. Say hi.
Hi.
Very, very professional around here.
Yeah.
So I do have a couple questions just to maybe get people familiar with you. So your channel name is The Secret History Living in Your Aquarium, which kind of gives away what your channel is about, but give us a brief description of your channel.
Well, I'm real bad at brief, but I'll try. So, it's usually so it started as a journal, keeping track of what I was doing in the hobby about 5.5, 6 years ago. And then I decided, well, as a history major, as an archaeologist, like I have a background in archaeology and anthropology and history, like those are the things I studied. And as an archaeologist, you get a little bit of biology, geology, meteorology, soil composition, anatomy, biology. I mean, it kind of covers a lot of stuff, but not in depth. You know, you have to specialize. So I thought it'd be fun to apply kind of the historian point of view to a channel, and also to kind of give it the treatment of using scientific sources, looking at academic journal articles that are coming out recently or in the past, and basically pretending that you are in a fish room or in an aquarium. And if you start there and work your way back, what are all the different things that you would learn about? So like if you were just bored out of your mind, stuck in a fishbowl, you'd start thinking about like, okay, well, this glass, how's glass made? When were the first fish bowls made? Where's glass made now? Why is there a shortage of it? What's low iron glass? What's the clarity? What's the refraction points? Should edges be beveled? Like, and so it kind of goes off on these tangents on any one thing, but there's still species spotlights. There's still just random hangout stream type vibes too. But it's a lot of research and not a lot of production value, honestly. It's I crank out quite a bit of volume of content, but not a lot of high editing. It's almost like a podcast format more so, is how I just
Sure. I did actually look. So in the last 30 days, you put out 22 various types of videos, whether they're live streams or, just 22 pieces of content, I should say.
Yeah, I tend to do about 7 or 8 a week, although some of them are like mini episodes that are like, which I know for some people that's a normal episode, but my episodes tend to run about 20, 25 minutes. And a lot of episodes are more like the mini ones are more like 3 to 7 minutes usually. And those will be like whatever was discovered this week for like my members. And then on the Aquatic Morning Show, they also carry it, because I'm also really against like paywalls for information. Like I don't mind paywalls for fun and for hanging out and accessing certain things like that are frivolous, but I really am of the like opinion that anybody, any kid in anywhere in the world should be able to have access to actual educational material and things like archives and stuff like that. I'm very pro open source on that. And the same with when people, whenever they contact me and say, hey, can I use something that you made? The answer's invariably yes. If it's for something educational, so.
So do you think that all fish clubs should not have an annual fee?
No, I totally understand that, because it's more than just education. It's a lot of learning. It's a lot of booking sites and things like that. And I mean, that costs money. But what I do like is when they use like their auction money as the basis, and the membership's like $10 or something. Like my memberships are $1.99. You can pay more, and because of that, like people pay more, and I'm really grateful. But I've definitely noticed the internet has definitely changed from kind of this open source dream that people thought it might be like 15 or 20 years ago when we were younger, to like, what can we monetize and put ads on? And I'll run ads, and that's the way I make some money. and or I'll work with a very few people. But like if someone's breeding really good shrimp or something, and they want to give a commission for the shout out, that's the kind of stuff that I believe in. But I just for the most part, I really am trying to get actual experts in the field, of whatever that may be, if it's macrobiology, microbiology, ichthyology, and then really nail it down to like what it is they're studying, what it is their life work is, and trying to archive that, and as well as work in the past and inventions in the past. And the other thing, the channel I like to go into is human causes of things that you wouldn't ever expect to impact our hobby, but that do drastically. Like, why can't I get pea puffers? Oh, it's because there's an ethnic conflict going on in Malabar province of India, or Lake Inle, there's a civil war in Myanmar. Why can't I get my CPDs? This is ridiculous. Why are they $10? So looking into some of those things and connecting the pieces of that, as well as preservation and conservation. And lately I've been working a lot with Dr. Anthony Mazeral and Ivan Mikolji. And Ivan and I set up a nonprofit called the Green Earth Alliance, that we're trying to basically set up micro grants for people studying, professors and grad students, basically, in the developing world. He lives in Venezuela, Ivan in English it would be, but he has a lot of work that people have probably seen photography wise for the last 20 years. And he's really documented the Orinoco, and he's gone out with scientists that honestly, they live on like $4,000 or $5,000 a year. So to get them to go do a month-long expedition with just as good quality of research, maybe lacking some tools though, but they have just as much heart. If anything, they know the country they're in better usually if they're from there, and so they don't have to deal with like quite as many permits and like security entourages and things, but they can really get in there. And so our goal is kind of there's a nonprofit called Kiva that gives out loans in the developing world, and we kind of want to be that, but with grants. So someone needs $500 because they need a compounding microscope and literally don't have it, and that's preventing them from publishing 5 papers that their university has stacked up. So we're seeing where a few $100s and 10, 5, however much people want to donate, small amount crowdsourcing, is actually getting like fish discovered and the Latin names recorded, and then because of that you can then mark them for preservation or whatever needs to happen with various international groups or within that country. So that's something we've been pretty passionate on, kind of a collective group of a few of us, and the channel also.
So just real quickly, speaking of memberships, I did get a new member, Emily, here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And then we had another member comment that says, be a cool kid, join the Steen Dream Team. It's so fun. We just do an hour-long stream before this stream every Monday for the members. It's very rarely fish related, as Alex can vouch for that.
Yeah,
we just talk about random stuff, so no paywall here either.
All hot rods and robots.
Yeah. And then speaking of Mazeral, do you plan on ever going down to the research center?
Yeah, so I had a spine surgery in February, and so I'm still technically supposed to be doing physical therapy for that. Like, I'm kind of not, I just stopped going to the actual sessions, but in any case, I've still got a bunch of exercises I need to do, and like, I can't stand on uneven surfaces that well because I lost 70% of the use of my right leg right before the surgery. Like, the nerves were pinched so bad, and so that's been unblocked, but it still takes some time. And so hopefully whenever that settles down, I'm going to go fly down to Iquitos. And also then Ivan Mikolji, he lives in Caracas, Venezuela, but he wants to meet in, since Americans can't really just fly straight to Venezuela very well, he wants to meet up in Colombia. And there's a spot where kind of like Brazil, I think it is, and Colombia and Venezuela all kind of meet together. and he wants to meet up there. And apparently it's kind of like a pirate town almost of like fish traders and other traders. You can use your imagination what gets traded in the Andes Mountains coming down through the rivers to the Amazon. But it's kind of a crazy area apparently, but it's like kind of also the last frontier with like air conditioning and like electricity and cell phones. So he wants to meet there because Colombia has a lot looser collection laws, but you can just go down the river basically and collect whatever you want. So that I really want to go do that. And then also, yeah, the Dr. Mazeral has kindly. I'm working on a book with him right now, and him and his wife, and it's basically educating the indigenous children there that live kind of outside the cities and in the cities, but recently moved in from kind of tribal life or semi-primitive living, as I don't know what you want to call it, but there's a lot of people that have kind of been displaced in the Amazon as farming and agriculture and industry creeps out. And they've gone from living maybe a life where they're trading with the outside, but they live pretty primitive. And now they're kind of all moving to cities trying to get wage jobs, and there's not always places for them, and these slums pop up, and it's kind of this interesting situation, and unleashing the potential of all those slumdog millionaire kids, you know, is kind of the hope. And also, you know, they're connected to the people that are poaching, that are, you know, doing things. And so if we can help educate them, we're working with the Peruvian government also. But my role, basically, we help look at indigenous cultures and stories, mythology, and they have like kind of a unified mythology of this tree that's kind of this wise grandfather character in their religion. That's, I mean, the Amazon's not one culture. There's thousands of tribes, and a lot of them though do have this common myth of either a stone or a tree coming to life and being kind of the main god figure, and then everything under it is kind of its lighter deities or family members. And so the pink dolphins down there that live in the Amazon River are really beloved by the kids because they're cute. I mean, there's that, but they also serve as, in their mythology, they're supposed to be protectors of the river and the fish and the harvest and the floods and all that kind of stuff. So we kind of made a main character based on one of their princess myths, like of the gods, and kind of teams up with a kid and a little macaw parrot, and they you know, go into camps of poachers and set the birds free. They look for sustainable aquaculture ponds and how to raise fish off season. And then in tandem, Dr. Mazeral is doing his nonprofit center, the Center for Research of the Center for Amazon, for Research of Amazon Fish. It's so hard to remember the order of those things. But he has a free aquarium that he's setting up, basically, that's going to have all the native fish. Because if you ask the kids and the people that live there, like, do you know what's in the river? The answer frequently is like, yes, but only the food fish, you know, or yes, if they catch neon tetras for a living and sell them. And right now, like, for instance, cardinal tetras, a kilo of cardinal tetras, baby cardinal tetras, like a half inch to an inch long, a kilo is $4 at the wholesale price. So it's also about how can we get them a little higher price, and also how can we teach them, rather than only collecting when it's becoming the dry season and all these puddles are reduced, and then they scoop up these fish that oftentimes would die anyways. Dr. Anthony's research is basically on, okay, well, what fisheries are sustainable? Like, which ones are those fish just going to die and dry up every year? And really, you're affecting the ecosystem only in the sense that you're taking nitrates out of the soil by not letting the fish rot in the forest, and you're not providing as much food. But the amount of fish that are collected for the hobby is minuscule compared to like how many fish are out in that whole area. So as long as it's not like trawl netting, you know, one part of the river, we're talking people out in canoes with dip nets. So it's talking about how we can get those Piaba Eros, as they're known, that live there in Peru and in Brazil, and teach them also how to keep aquaculture in the off season for food. So like they have a lot of tilapia and gouramis and other things that have been brought in that are now becoming invasive. And so it's kind of like, how can we pivot and teach them really inexpensively? You can dig a ditch, you can have duckweed that you can then, turn into pellets, and that's 50% of the protein in the food that you feed back to the fish. And so it's really talking about how to do that off the grid or with solar panels, maybe really low cost. And then at the same time, teaching the kids that come through the aquarium about preservation and about why you shouldn't dump your sewage and motor oil into the river, because a lot of them honestly are first generations out of the jungle, and their parents really don't understand the concept of like a finite amount of things. Like the river has always just taken everything away and gone downstream, and there's no one upstream from them, like pollution wise, historically. And so now when it's starting to build up, because there's 500,000 people in the middle of the jungle forming a city, things need to change. And if they don't have these, they estimate that 80,000 people are employed in the Piaba Eros different lines of work with fish, but then that supports, people who sell nets, people who sell food to those people. And so hopefully we can keep up that and even develop more raising of apistogrammas and plecos and other harder to culture species, and bring them more directly out of the jungle rather than through wholesalers who are going to profit 900% or 5,000%. Maybe we can knock that down a bit and keep those indigenous people less reliant on government and foreign aid to just survive. So
yeah, because
that's kind of what we're doing.
if you're talking $4 for a kilo when they're selling them wholesale between $1 and $2, depending on how many you buy,
yeah,
that's pretty significant markup.
Yeah, and I mean that kilo may take them 2 days to collect, and so it's very low. I mean, the living wage down there, I think it's like $200 a month or something in the Amazon region, give or take. And a lot of it's trade, obviously. You barter, and so that kind of gets rid of a lot of money. But yeah, so, and it's something that like I've been meaning to get down there. I've always wanted to travel there and stuff, but I also have lupus, autoimmune disorder. So part of it's just been like getting that under control with medications here in the US. And then I've had health problems because of getting hit by lightning 4 years ago, which sucked. And other than that, though, I mean, it's something that's on my to-do list, and I'm kind of hoping to visit both guys when I'm down there if I can, and stay like a month,
Yeah, that would be I've always wanted to go to Colombia for various reasons.
Yeah, and I have one of my.
I would love to go there, and the doc has given me an open invite to the research center as well. So
yeah,
that's pretty neat. As I'll get down there too eventually.
Well, and he was talking about, he's like, hey, if you know any YouTubers that you trust that that would represent us well and not just be goofy and whatever, swallowing goldfish and puking them back up or some nonsense, then pass the word on. And so, I was thinking, like, I talked to Lucas Bretz too, and he wants to go too. So
I think we might lose him in Colombia. He might get there and never come back.
He keeps going south, man.
That's true.
I'm sure my wife
would be a lot of fun.
I'm sure my wife would want to go too. So part of it would be working out her schedule. We really like traveling when we can, but yeah, I kind of have a similar mindset to you as the like, do what you love and do it a bunch of hours, or do it like hardcore. And if it makes money, that's great. But like, life's not worth living just like sitting in a cubicle doing something you hate,
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather.
I've never done that. Can't do it.
Yeah, so yeah, and with my health, like I really can't do some of the things I used to, but like they wanted me to come paint a mural, and that was something that was kind of a bummer because I used to be able to spend 12 or 15 hours up against the wall doing a mural with my head looking up, and now I really can't. I can't pull that off anymore. I'll be wrecked the next day if I do it, but um I do want to do a mural for their center, and so I've talked to them about like, well, what if I do it on canvas up here and we ship it down and then gesso it onto the wall? So we might work out something like that. I'm not sure, but I mean, I think there's amazing artists down there that could probably pull it off, also. So
But how
that's something.
amazing would it be to have one of your murals like in South America? Just
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've been blessed to have been an artist for my entire adult life, kind of accidentally. Like I got the archaeology track and degree, and I finished up with like my thesis and everything like in '08, right as the economy just went down the toilet.
mm,
And so then I went to tattooing for a living, and that turned into graphic design, and that turned into murals, and that, just any weird little odds and end jobs, a lot of logos for local businesses and things. And that's given me a lot of flexibility, not necessarily a ton of money, but a lot of flexibility in what I want to do and the things that I enjoy doing. But I've also kind of used to a certain level of like, I don't need the newest clothes, I don't need the newest this or that. Like I'm pretty happy when I'm in my zone with like a book or some research papers and a sunny day, and you know or
yep.
cooped up in the corner with like this here water pipe.
Yeah, I mean, in my early 20s, I worked 2 full-time jobs. I always had to have the latest and greatest TV and cell phone and all that stuff. And now it's like I refuse to even spend more than $2,500 for a car. Like I don't need any of that crap. Like
I've
my
never
time
had
is
a new
way more
car.
valuable.
Yeah. I definitely feel you on that one. I want a car that's reliable, and I push that limit sometimes even. Like right now I've got a Ford Ranger that's like a 2003 that was at auction. It was like left for like 10 years, all mildewed and sitting in some lady's yard after her husband passed away. But it had like 40,000 miles on it when I got it. So it's mine.
Yeah, I mean
But my last
that's the
car
way to do it. I
was
can't
a
I've
Ford
been
Escort hatchback, and I just painted fish and
I can see
wildlife
that.
all over the thing in monochrome paint. So like everybody I knew would like, I'd constantly get texts from people being like, I just saw you driving through downtown or whatever. And now I
Somehow that
sold the
doesn't
car.
surprise me.
Well, I sold the car now to another guy, and he actually paid me like more than Blue Book because he wanted it as like an art piece. He didn't necessarily need it to drive. And apparently people still see it because I still get texts where people are like, dude, I saw you, and I'm like, I haven't had that car in like 5 years, 4 years. So yeah,
All right,
but
real quick here. Just to gotta acknowledge some super chats. Ginger Grumble with the $5 super chat says, "Please hit the like." I agree, definitely hit the like button. And Max K says, "Glad to see you both doing a collaboration. Thank you for the content." Well, thank you, Max, for the super chat. I appreciate it. And we'll get to comments eventually. Maybe in the later part of the stream. We're not ignoring anyone, and I want to thank
oh,
the
I
people
am.
that are yeah. But
I can't see him.
this, um, but I do want to thank the people that are answering questions in the chat. I do appreciate that. And then I have another question for you. Do you have any speaking gigs this year?
Yeah, so I'm speaking in Eugene on the 18th, I guess. That she just told me that it's changed from the 19th to the 8th. Well, I got a text this morning that was like, "Hey, are you free the 26th?" And I was like, "Ooh, I don't know if I can do that." And they're like, "Okay, well, what about the 18th?" So sounds like the 18th is when I'll be going down to the Willamette Valley Aquarius Club, and then I'm also in talks with down in Florida, right where Lucas lives, what his club down there in the Ocala kind of. I can't remember. It's the name of a county. It's or like the something county and greater area club. Hermosa or Homosassa, whatever. Yeah. So, and my wife happened to live down there, and her mom happens to live down there, so that would really work out that we could visit family too. And then the other, yeah, Homosassa Springs and like Silver Springs, which I went there 4 years ago and documented it for the channel, and it's like incredible, like the water there, and there's these streams that are 74 degrees Celsius all, or it's Fahrenheit, not Celsius.
It's just like,
All
all right.
Yeah, they're boiling all year round, perfect for life. But the manatees come in when it's cold, and they need to warm up in the winter when the ocean's cooler, and when the ocean's too hot, they come back in. But when I was there, I have footage of like these bowfin, big old cool like prehistoric looking fish that are a couple feet long and like 2 feet long, and also hundreds of plecos, like common plecos spawning, and I was just like, oh no. But I really want to go back and catch some like Elasoma and Heteranda formosa and all the little cool top minnows and native fish that are there. I don't know, in case people don't know who like what kind of tanks I keep, they're a little bit planted.
Just a bit.
Just a bit. And so I definitely am all about the plants too. So when we went to Florida, I was like scheming to bringing home plants, and I had a few like Rotala, Ramosier Florida that I put in my bag, and that didn't make it home. But again, like all my shelves are planted very heavily. A lot of them don't have filters. I mean, I love filters. I love like this one has CO2 and filtration and everything. But and I appreciate aquascaping and all the fancy stuff you can do. But there's something about like mastering. Oh, that's too bright. There's something about mastering your environment and recreating that native slice of life for your critters that I really find fulfilling. So
yeah, I kind of do the same thing with my tanks. Is I just throw in a bunch of plants and let them grow. I don't aquascape very much. Like obviously, I have hardscape in there, but I love like the jungle, just crazy amount of plants in there.
yeah, I mean, for a while I had the collectoritis, like because I wasn't as I've kept fish for 27 years or so, I guess, like pretty consistently. But and that's as a kid, obviously, because I'm 35 now. But like I liked guppies, and I had goldfish and a betta when I was young. But by 12 or 13, I was breeding bettas. I remember purple metallic snake skins were like cutting edge at the time. And like purple was kind of a new color morph to have lavender on its own. And I was selling them on eBay, which was brand new at the time too. And so that's kind of like when I got into it like on my own, rather than my parents being like, here's a fish tank. And my mom would like clean the fish tank out when I was like 7 or 8. She'd come in and she'd be like, you got to feed them every day and do this and that. Well, then every month she would scrub the entire tank and the filters down with soap and water and like scrape them, totally clean, and then fill it with, luckily we have really low TDS, low anything water around here. So I think they survived just on that. But it just cracks me up like how fish keeping for me has changed from like, bright like blue gravel and plastic plants, and me thinking like, oh man, plants mean algae means danger, to now I'm like trying to culture like thick mats of it for my like fish, and it's like it's just kind of crazy, and the substrate and everything, all that's involved with it. I try not to pick any one method because my channel's all about exploring a bunch of methods, but I really do like going through and seeing what's out there, trying every kind of filtration and seeing what the pros and cons are. And I don't think there's any right or wrong way to do things as long as the fish are thriving. Pretty much if they'll reproduce, I think you're doing a good job. Unless
Yeah,
it's guppies, then you might be doing a bad job still.
there's always that canister filters are the best, or
Oh
no
yeah.
filters is the best. And I always try to avoid channels when they start speaking like that, because
Oh, I
there's
know.
so many ways to be successful. Like
Yeah,
Come
do
on.
what makes you happy. I mean, like as much as people want to say like, "Oh, I'm saving the species," or I'm a conservationist, and I feel that way. I do feel that way, but it's ultimately a self-indulgent thing where you're like, "I am collecting animals to look at and building little worlds. I am the god of." So I try to keep that in mind too, that like this is a luxury, like this is first world kind of stuff. Otherwise I'd be going and looking at nature. But I love being able to recreate like Africa here, and 2 feet next to it have Myanmar. You know, like this is a Myanmar biotope that I plan on entering in the big biotope competition this year. And I've got 9 species in there from Lake Inlet specifically. Like, and this lake is smaller than Lake Washington. It's like I think 20 miles long, 30 miles long, and 12 feet deep. But it's got 58 species of fish in it that are that have the color red. All of them have the color red on them, which is kind of weird and cool.
Hmm.
But they 58 species in one lake that are endemic. It's pretty crazy. So there's these spots in the world that like we didn't discover the diversity there until 2006 because there was the military junta that was basically the government was either a hardcore communist like rebellious college kids taking over, and then it was switching back to like a brutal military dictatorship, and then China in the north was like keeping people out, and then Thailand was full of other sketchy activities that you like Westerners couldn't go through. So in 2006, it opened up and they discovered in that lake the celestial pearl danio, the erythromicrons, rosy loaches, the Thai border loaches. I mean, so many of them that we might think of as like, oh, they're in the hobby. They've probably been around a long time. Like we're still discovering so much new stuff. It's cool. This week they just announced 2 new darters discovered in the Madeira River in near Apaui, Brazil, and one of them's like
And
a
if I was good at what I do, I'd be able to bring that up on screen. But I'm not
well,
good, so you'll have to search Alex's channel to see those. I'm
yeah, I
assuming you're
haven't
gonna do a
actually
video on them.
posted it yet because so I paid $40 to read this stupid article, which I hate, but I paid $40 for that to unlock this new article in this scholarly journal, and then it says like that even if you paid for the article, you can't use the photos even in an educational capacity. Uh,
Hmm.
like no creative use rights on them, which I was really bummed about. But CNN.com does have a story. If you search, like if you Google CNN to Amazon darters, like you'll find it. They must have paid them to get the rights, or they just put it up and they're like, "We're CNN. We'll deal with the lawyer later." Uh,
Yeah, that's they're not very creative, so maybe that's how they get around it.
yeah. So, but yeah, I really do want to show it. So I'm waiting like any day now. There should be some locals collecting photos because as soon as the story broke on CNN, of course, somebody out in the middle of the rainforest, some kid on an account on WhatsApp started hitting up every fish person he could find, and he hit up a couple people I know. I didn't talk to the kid, but he said $150 a fish. I'll send him to any country in the world. 150 a fish for the new species. I was like, wow, that didn't take long.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean that's gold for them for a little while. There's a new pencil fish that was discovered about 3 weeks ago too, and it's solid red, no stripes on it. Looks like a coral pencil fish, but without any striping on it. Like it's just beet red. And the guy who discovered it is saying it came from west of the Andes, which is not where the Amazon is. So it's just funny. Like, how do you think? Like, is he joking, or does he really think that's going to throw some idiot off? So anybody who's willing to spend the time and energy to get down there to collect things is going to figure that one out. But yeah, it's an interesting one. There's pictures of that one too. Some bidder in Hong Kong paid $500 for each of the 6 pencil fish that they found that were this new species.
Wow.
and had them overnighted to Hong Kong, and he's trying to breed them. So we will see if they'll be in the hobby soon.
I wish I could remember the name of the speaker, but Seattle had a speaker in there, and he was talking about um, how they found a purple Asian arowana, and like nobody is giving the location away because they know like people will just come in and start
Yeah.
yanking them out of there left and right. And he had pictures of them. So yeah, I could.
Was
Man,
that
that'd be
Bod Rock
crazy.
or something? Or
I'd have to go back and look. He was doing it was kind of a Rasbora talk, but it was all out of a specific lake or country, and I cannot for the life of me remember, and I haven't paid my due, so I can't go look it up.
yeah, I mean, I was probably at that, but I'm not remembering it either. So if it's happened in the last 6 or 7 years, I was probably there. So with a few exceptions.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing you there. One of the few that I actually went to.
I was gonna say I don't think I've ever seen you there. Like I've seen you once or twice, but hardly ever. But it's not really at a convenient time or place for a lot of
No,
people. So
not even for a dude that doesn't have a job. Like
right,
I still don't want to be down in Seattle at midnight on a Tuesday. That's just not gonna
right,
be
I
fun for
know.
me.
Yeah. Well, and then the last 2 years, it's basically been shut down as an in-person thing. So
Yeah.
there's only been a few meetings in person. So yeah, definitely. Well, it looks like the plants are going to consume you.
So, uh, between the last stream, last hour, and right before we went live, I actually knocked this one down.
Oh,
Yeah, so I've got like dirt and water all over my floor, and I was like, well, I got no time to clean that up. So,
and story of my life, man. Like I'm like a tornado when it comes to like working on projects. Like I have like all these buckets, and I'm literally trying to grow different kinds of paramecium right now because I've been doing this whole series under the microscope, and people are like constantly commenting like I'm never putting my hands in a tank again. Like there are 40 species of like amoeba and planaria and you name it, protists and rotifers and stuff that all live in there.
yeah, well, there's someone who's doing that with like food and like putting it under a microscope, and you see like all the like he's doing like hot dogs and like
Oh
chicken
yeah, yeah,
nuggets
yeah.
and like I mean that stuff makes me never want to eat food again, seeing what's
Yeah,
actually in
yeah.
it.
There's also a gal who was doing that with like they featured her in an ad for B&H photography that never stops playing on my YouTube. But she's another photographer where she used a microscope to look at pizza ingredients and like pepperoni. No, I never want to eat it again after looking at it at
It's
400
so
times.
gross.
It's just
Ugh.
like pure oil and fat. It's like all lipids. And she does it where you can like see the chains of fat, like molecularly almost. She's got a really expensive microscope. I'll stick with my secondhand 70s microscope that only does 400 zoom. That keeps things less gross. Like you don't see all the bacteria one for one. You can see like amoebas and tardigrades and like stentors and other little critters, but you don't have to see the really gnarly stuff. But it's just crazy that if you take literally one eyedropper of water from a tank, you're gonna have a few species of little critters in any given dropper. And so in a recent series, I went and I got filter floss from tanks. One was 2 weeks old, one was 3 months old, another one was a year, then 3 years, then 5 years. And then another one was brand new, and I jump started it with the 5-year-old tank. And I compared what the filter media looked like under the microscope. And it's pretty crazy, like how long it really does take though to season. Like that's what I'm using, season versus cycled seems to be the term folks are throwing around. But it's crazy how long it takes. Really, I'm finding 2 to 3 years is when you kind of hit your max, and then from there it kind of plateaus for more or less. But it's really important, people, if they're going to keep a natural tank and they're not going to use chemicals and stuff like that, like the importance of like the fact that when I look under the microscope, I see at least 12 different kinds of fungi, at least a dozen kinds of algae, yet the tank looks fine. There's no algae hardly in the tank. And my tanks that have hardly any algae that are old, I always find a bunch of algae in there in very microscopic bits and amounts, like in the filter, in the substrate. And it's the fact that they're all there, like crowding each other like out, that no one becomes a monoculture and takes over. Whereas in a new tank, whatever algae gets in there first is going to be the one that makes itself explode on you in the first few months. But I mean, monocultures and like, you know, the Irish potato famine, or how the bananas. We used to have the Grand Cavendish banana. That's why banana candy doesn't taste anything like bananas nowadays. Is because like they only grew one freaking type of banana, and in like 1957, some blight came and killed every banana tree. And now we have, or it used to be the Grand Michel. Now we have the Grand Cavendish. Now we have the Cavendish banana. Apparently, the Cavendish tastes like garbage compared to the Grand Michel. But I did hear that you can get Grand Michel bananas overseas, like on the DL, from the Philippines, I think it is. Like there's like one spot.
Yeah, you'd think they would have to be out there. I know, like all the bananas we get are not real bananas, but you would think like there has to still be some out there somewhere.
There are, yeah. I've seen YouTubers eating them. They're like a little stubbier, and they're totally white. And apparently, they taste like more tapioca-ish and more like ripe and sweet, and like banana candy flavor-wise. Like, you know, whereas yeah, banana candy was designed from some chemical in the 1940s, after like during or after World War II, and they never changed it back to try to mimic what the bananas we get are, the Cavendish. So yeah, weird things that us people do, you know.
There you go, history of bananas.
The secret history of bananas. It's bananas. Well, my wife works in produce. She works for a company called Charlie's Produce, and she's now their marketing director. And so like it's been fun kind of teaming up with her and doing like little TikToks and videos where we're having to feature a certain thing and doing a little bit of research on it. Like I'm just a nerd for trying to find like trivial tidbits of information that haven't been seen. Like so rarely these days do I feel like people are willing to, like, you go to Google, and how often do you go to the third or fourth page? Never. And like you go to the Wikipedia article, and when you click on the little annotations, half of them link to something that's totally irrelevant, or it doesn't say the thing that they say it says.
Mm-hmm.
Yet that's the thing that everyone cites for the next 50 years going forward. So what I really have had fun doing with the channel is going back and finding that book at the library, or that digital scan of the hobbyist newsletter from 1907 in New York. And it's like, so that's why we think that, you know, this fish needs this or that. And it's like, really, it has no, it's like, there's no rhyme or reason why that became that way.
Well, it's really bad with fish. Like if you search fish right now on Google, where like, you know, maybe like 5 years ago, like the first one would always be like Seriously Fish, where, you know, you're getting some pretty good information. Now Seriously Fish is pushed way down for all these people that have built like blog sites using SEO, and it's just like the most misinformation I've ever seen, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's I mean, I understand that it's not for everybody. And the beginning level, most people aren't going to jump in as intense as like the channel stuff that I cover. But I really wanted, and like that's part of like my goal is to try to spread this to other channels too. Is like, if you know how to do it, like you don't have to have a degree or a doctorate or whatever. Like if you do, great. But I mean, there's people doing just as valid, just as good of work that are just totally self-taught, you know. And if you can document why, like at least evidence of why you think what you think, do set up a basic scientific experiments, or cite something of why things are. I'm just amazed that in such a science-based hobby, almost no creators, and I mean, it is a lot of work, I get it, but almost no creators cite anything of like academic rigor. as to where they got the info of like, oh, this new fish, it has needs these parameters and needs this or that. And it's like, then you end up having people in Florida that are like, well, I'm breeding German Rams in 400 TDS, so I don't know what y'all are doing. And then other people are like, they'll die if the
Mhm.
TDS goes over 100, you know? So it's kind of interesting. I mean, Radnocentris, I know that's a fish you like too, and that's one that I like. But there's not anything on the internet other than anecdotal stuff documenting how cold it gets where they live. And so it's all just word of mouth. And I mean, word of mouth is kind of works usually in a way where like the good info keeps getting passed on, but that doesn't always work. Sometimes it's just a big game of telephone, you know?
Yeah, the big telephone game for sure.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So
because I mean, like in a rainbow fish group I'm in, somebody asked like, "What's the coldest?" And they're like, "Oh, you know, you don't want to take them below 60." And one of the guys was like, "Actually, I live where this fish is collected, and it gets down into the 40s." You know, so it's like
yeah.
it could be interesting.
Well, yeah, and I mean, like, if you read the old accounts from like the 1940s, 30s, 40s, 50s, like guppies never were kept with heaters back then or filters. They were kept in a bowl, like, you know, stereotypical goldfish style. Same with Danios. Like, a zebra Danio can withstand going into space in a Ziploc bag. Like, they're pretty hardy creatures. Um, I've seen them in up to like 7 parts per million ammonia when like I've gotten them when I've taken them in from people who are like, here's my fish, and it's like in a bag of the
Their
water it
gilder
was
just
in.
beat red.
Yeah. And they've recovered and been fine. In fact, that is one of the, you know, there's all these controversies like do you cycle with a fish in, do you not? Do you add ammonia to the cycle while you're doing it? Do you add plants? Do you not? Do you use the quick start bacteria? There's so many different like things, and in the end, like it doesn't matter, whatever works for you works. But you know, I just find it amazing when you do see the limits of like where it stops working and where it can work, and like somewhere in between that is like probably a happy medium. But yeah, I just find it pretty interesting. So
Well, I think a lot of it comes from, and I make this argument all the time. Like people try to replicate their natural environment when a lot of the fish we see in the hobby have never even seen their natural environment
right.
or lived in those water parameters. You know, they're being bred in Florida in hard water. You know.
Totally. And I mean that's something too with like neocaridina shrimp and caridina shrimp. Like I recently got, and I'll go over to them because they're pretty, but I recently got some caridina shrimp from Grant Eater of Garden of Eater Shrimps, and he lives in Florida. And I've got like 7 or 8 species of caridina now with neocaridina, like several kinds, and they're doing great. And I don't have a filter or a heater or like anything on these guys, and they're doing super well, and having lots of babies, and like it's because he's bred them in Florida water. So when they get to our water, they're like, oh wow, this is super nice, you know? Because Florida water is like hell for a caridina shrimp compared to ours. So if he got it to work in Florida, then it gets here and it's like, you know, Club Med or whatever. So,
Yeah, they're
and
going
then I've got a
crazy
bunch of
now.
rice fish that like we were talking about it on the closed or on the private stream, but I'm also getting ready to put everything out in tubs. And so I've got like
Hmm.
some black Medacas, some platinum Medacas, some white fin yellowtail Medaca, and then some red cap Medaka that I'm getting ready to put out probably next weekend. I think is probably the plan. So
Yeah, I mistakenly killed all my rice fish that I had out in the tub.
I did
Uh,
that last year in the heat. The heat killed them all. I was very very frustrated by that.
so
Did you do that this year?
I was filling the tub up with just a hose, and turned the hose off, but I left the hose in the tub like an idiot, and then
Oh,
did some other stuff, came back and went to put the hose away, and I unscrewed it from the faucet, the outdoor faucet, and I was like, oh, I got distracted, and of course it all back siphoned back out by the time I noticed it, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's a big puddle of water sitting there. I'm all looking for any fish that made it through the hose, but no, none of them made it.
Like all flipping around.
Man, yeah, it sucked. So I need to get some more rice fish too.
Yeah, dude, it's crazy to see the prices of fish. Like that's another thing that I've tried to cover on the channel and that I'm just really interested in is like why are the fish prices going up? Like is this a legit thing or is this just because they can raise the prices, you know? And that's always like I guess that's kind of a conspiratorial outlook on things, but I feel like, you know, same with gas or whatever. You're like, is it really like $7 a gallon or whatever right now? Or, you know, is it still five and they're just doing it because they can and they're testing it out to
Mhm.
see how it goes? But I mean,
Well, you'll
like,
notice when the price of stuff goes up, it goes up really fast. But when it's time for it to come down, it takes weeks, if
right,
not a month or two.
right. Yeah, exactly. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's crazy. And rice fish, literally 3 or 4 years ago, I remember going into Aquarium Co-op and going to buy some, and it was like two for $1 for just assorted rice fish. And they're like, we can't give these away. Nobody wants them. Everybody bred them this year in the tubs, and now they're like $15, you know, for like the black ones or the red caps or whatever. Um, but it's kind of cool. Like I've talked to a couple folks, specifically in the Sacramento area and the Bay Area too, that are they have like family ties in Japan, and they've been importing some of the fancier strains that historically, like you needed to know somebody in the know to allow that to get sent out. Like for rice fish, they're probably like the fifth oldest domesticated fish that is still domesticated anyways. And like they've been domesticated for probably 500 to 1,000 years in some capacity. And the Japanese, like different provinces and cities and families within those are known for like this province we have the black ones, and then this town in that province, this family breeds the balloon body, and this other one breeds the long fin body variety. And a lot of those have never made it to the US and have kind of been kept close to the vest as like kind of a trade secret. And now finally those are coming in. Maybe I don't know if it's just somebody's willing to pay it the right price or if it really is that somebody's family members or whatever were like, oh, okay, here you go. So,
Well, it's
but
probably
you look
somebody's
at like,
family member that needed money.
yeah, exactly. Like you look at Rio Watanabe's channel and like the rice fish he can get in Japan and it's or Singapore or wherever, and it's just like, oh, wow, compared to the U.S. You know, it's like that looks like a different fish altogether. So.
Yeah, and it's a perfect fish for outside too, because they can live outside year round almost everywhere here.
Yeah, yeah. They can probably live in the lower 48. They could probably live outside every state, but maybe like North Dakota and Minnesota. Maybe like those might be the limits. But
A little
I
too
mean, they've
extreme,
been
yeah.
reported -20 as long as there's like mud and substrate for them to kind of like go bury into. And actually, in some of those places where it freezes solid, they're okay because they go into it's not true hibernation. It's what's called metabolic torpor, and they just slow everything down, and they actually can, some of them including the rice fish actually have a special process where they can extract, they can let the iron in their blood cells oxidate from environmental oxygen and then rip that iron off the oxidated red blood cells off the hemoglobin and actually use it more effectively than normal metabolic processes are. So it's kind of cool that I mean carp can do that too, but they've evolved to do that, and I feel like we don't give them credit. And like part of the hobby that's so interesting to me is like pushing those limits and finding out what fish can do, like the fact that mormyrids talk with electronic signaling, you know. um, that's blowing my mind. That's another thing that I've been studying where the recent research has come out that like linguistic people were given copies of them communicating, which are in either sine waves or I guess would be logarithmic wave patterns electrically. And Petersii mormyrid, the elephant nose fish, the smaller one, when it's ready to talk and it has something important to say, like let's mate or run, danger, it has a specific like noise or frequency that it emits through the water electrically, and all the other fish shut up, where usually there's chatter amongst the fish, and they say about 25 or 30 different unique little wavelength patterns that seem to be saying like, come eat here, like I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm sad, or whatever they say. And then they've got the one that's like, shut up for a minute, and everyone shuts up for like 10 to 15 seconds, and then they listen for that fish to speak again. But linguists actually looked at it and they thought they were reading some sort of AI, very simple language, but they could like identify, different structures that made sense to them as a language. So it may only be 30 words or 30 things they can say, but it's still pretty impressive. We're learning a lot about fish that we didn't know.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy, actually.
Yeah, the Mormorids they're smart. I mean, other than humans, they have the largest brain to body mass ratio in the vertebrate world, which is kind of interesting. I thought like an elephant or something would, but I guess an elephant weighs a little bit.
Just a bit more than me, not much.
Yeah, I mean, me post Thanksgiving dinner, about the same.
Definitely. So are you going to be going to the Fishtoberfest this year?
Oh yeah, I'm speaking at Fishtoberfest.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's what I was going to ask.
I'm sorry. I have like 4 or 5 speaking engagements lined up, but some of them I've kind of forgotten about, like that one. There's a few online ones too that I haven't included in my head because I don't have to do anything, and I've got at least 10 speeches ready. A lot of my episodes are the equivalent of like a 45-minute presentation, and that can be really dry to some people, but other people, enjoy it. They're like the NPR nerds that want to like go to the public library and all that kind of stuff. They probably find it their speed, but it's
Do you
not.
know what you're going to talk about? Because that's not the only show I'm going to this year.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm gonna talk. I mean, I have 10 different speeches I sent Kenny and was like, "What do you want me to talk about?" But I think what I want to talk about are the fundamentals of fish spawning or inducing spawning. So basically, chemical, temperature, barometric pressure and atmospheric conditions, and then flow and oxygenation, which is kind of chemical too. And then the last one being water level with flow. So, because it's kind of interesting, you can kind of get a breeding plan for almost every fish by knowing that background information. And so that's the one I'm thinking of. The other one that I really wanted to talk about, last year I did 10 moments and they came and had me speak at their just like their normal club meeting after Fishtoberfest. So I kind of did a little tweak on the same talk. But at Fishtoberfest last year, I think you saw it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was 10 moments that changed or basically allowed the fish hobby to move forward, like pivotal moments or inventions. And so another one that I think is interesting is war and fish keeping. And that sounds like a stretch maybe to some people, but really you can look at the tropical fish hobby. Well, you can look at any fish hobby and see, like, going back to the Romans and the Egyptians, that like they were trading garum, which is like dried sardines fermented in barrels. So they had to figure out ways to grow them in pens, and they had the saltwater pens that could be controlled by different like Archimedes, like water screw, and like different crazy different siphons and all sorts of wild plumbing that the Greeks and Romans and Carthaginians used. And then like later on, there were actual trade wars over that garum trade route and the dried fish trade route, and the control over those spawning grounds and the pens that they lived in. And then going forward, you have colonialism and how like this guy named Gerard, we don't know his last name, brought back the first paradise fish. He was a French soldier, and he was docked in Portugal in 1869. Brought the first paradise gourami or paradise fish to Europe. In 1659, the first goldfish makes it back to Europe from Hong Kong, probably, but it was a Portuguese explorer. And both those, within a matter of 2 or 3 years, they're all over the European continent. And the thing then, like World War I, World War II, really were the big events that sent people from the Western world. I mean, we'll call it that, but New Zealand, Australia, wherever, all over. People went all over the world to fight, and they saw like the tropics for the first time, before color television, before color movies even. And they saw, they went snorkeling with these beautiful fish. They were in the jungle seeing some of these things, or seeing bettas being kept during the Vietnam War. And like there's direct correlations. And like, for instance, in 1878, the general who was in charge of governing the U.S. Sphere of influence in the Philippines, up into the Spanish Civil War, he had a program where you could get a betta or a goldfish, mostly goldfish were what they brought back, for free from the Department of the Interior. And over 20,000 people signed up for it a year, and then they would give you at cost a goldfish bowl. And it was the U.S. government did that just because some crazy military general thought it was a cool, like, program. And you had to be under 18, but a bunch of adults were doing it too, just to get the goldfish. But then that led to the comet goldfish being developed in probably in southern Indiana on this particular farm. But I mean, there's a direct line, and then like the jet engine and intercontinental trade and ocean liners and battleships and steamers, like the way we get around the world was pushed forward by each of these major wars. And that's what then allowed a new wave of fish and animals to make it back quick enough and in stable enough condition to survive. So the other talk I'd like to suggest giving was the first angelfish to breed in San Francisco in 1917. They had a crazy journey that involved like German subs and all sorts of crazy stuff, but they came from South America to New York. And then this rich guy by the last name of Fuller and another guy by the name of Locke had an aquarium shop in San Francisco where they brought in a train car that had like two porters on it just to change the water and press the pumps for the air and to like light the oil burner and then evaporate the water where it was too hot coming through Arizona. And it's a pretty crazy story, all the inventions they made just to make that happen, and then trying to get them to breed. The story of those fish that started out 120 pairs, and I think they said 7 pairs made it to San Francisco alive, even
Wow.
with that.
So, of your most key or pivotal times that moved the aquarium hobby forward, what would you say are like the one or two most?
Okay. World War II, you could say as a whole, but really what it is the stationing of troops, and specifically American troops, because before that, the German and French hobby was ahead of America. But for a time after World War II, when Europe was devastated, Americans were the ones who were sitting high on the horse. And that's the kind of white picket fence. Everybody gets a car. If they work in a factory, you can make a wage to get a car, and a house in the suburbs, and 2.5 kids, that whole mythology. That era, though, is when fish were really commodified as almost a toy. And there's a book called Toy Fish that's pretty interesting about that, that Albert Klee wrote, and also the owner of Fritz Aquatic, or Zoomed, I mean. is opening a museum now in San Luis Obispo, California, with all these cool filters and stuff going back to the turn of the century. But in any case, these documented it, and it's really the intercontinental travel. So even on a steamship, you're looking at 3 to 8 weeks to get from anywhere tropical to any population center in, you know, America, and then longer to Europe, to get fish out. Well, by the end of World War II, they're developing jets, which then within 10 years are on, you know, planes for civilians. And, you know, Boeing's not long after the early 60s developing the 747. But all of a sudden, you've got massive amounts of cargo coming and going from anywhere you could imagine in the world. And that is really what allowed fish to come in. And that's where the true tropicals like discus and rams and some of the more tricky fish, the rarer oddballs, that's when they really became, that's like by the late 60s, you can see it had become kind of a hobby that we would know today. So that's really important. Before that, I would say heating and lighting was very important. So they used to just so electricity, but then you could narrow that down to, like I did in the talk, to the electric pump, which came out in 1927. General Electric had one, Sears catalog, and Sears company had like their own co-opted one. But for, I think it was like $23 for the General Electric. It was like $12.50 for the Sears one in 1923 was the very first one, and it would pump up a bicycle tire. It would, like, they had a list of things it could do, but one of them was leave it on and it would, you know, aerate your fish tank, and the heat generated from it would also heat your fish tank if you had this other attachment. So not like literally the reason they use slate on old aquariums is because they had oil lamps burning either whale fat or kerosene or, you know, paraffin wax, whatever it was, different things for different areas. But there was literally a candle cooking your fish tank, and you had to like constantly monitor it. Like, who wants to do that? That's freaking crazy. Plus, like an open flame, like right under every tank. It's insane. Like, they use gas lamps, so there were actual like covers. But then they came up with, you know, the first electric heaters within a year or two of that too. And most of them were under gravel, and they, like, a lot of them were just wires with like an open current into the water. And since it wasn't like grounded or whatever, like you weren't completing the circuit as long as you didn't stick your hand in it. So you'd have to undo the filter or the heater if you wanted to do anything in the tank, and it like electrocuted absurd amounts of people. So they're like, oh, maybe this isn't the best way. Like,
oh man,
those old Euroframe tanks, the metal ones that are, you know, Art Deco style, they're pretty expensive to collect still, but like those things have shocked a lot of people and killed several people, like documented, confirmed.
All right, so Zen Ginger has a question for you.
Oh, Zen.
And she says, if the Lacey Act went through as it was, how do you think it would affect conservation?
Well, I
Do you
just
think everyone would
not
just
to be
ditch it and start growing like aloe and like
so
ruining the forests?
well. So let me just break this down too, because also the Lacey Act is something that's already in effect, and they would be amending the Lacey Act to extend it. And I just want to get that terminology right, because a lot of people are like, stop the competes bill, and it's like this ginormous bill with like 4,000 things in it, and it's like nobody's going to listen to you on that talking point. You have to be very specific when you write your senators or Congress people. Senators are the ones who have any control now. The House already voted on it. But I would say that if that passes, what you'll probably see is websites popping up to buy and sell fish within states, because you can't move fish across state lines other than whatever they say are the set minimum. Now, a lot will have to then be determined about what the minimum quantity imported in the last year is. The other big loophole that I think they would need to figure out is, well, what about the fish we don't import because there aren't that many of them, like goodeids or endangered species that are in the hobby that aren't imported, but they're spot or sold. So that language would probably have to change very quickly to say that are not bought and sold commercially or retaily, because importation is broad, but I mean, we can keep plenty of fish that you couldn't import because of their rarity. There's about 18,000 fish in total in the freshwater listed known species. And I think we'd get more trade going on in the local hobby of areas for the very hardcore people. And I'm guessing they would approve 100 or 500, whatever species it is, but neon tetras, common plecos, the ones that they say they're trying to avoid are the ones they're not going to block because they make the most money for the big companies. And so I think that they would probably allow certain things to keep coming through that are very common fish. That anything you'd see at Petco or PetSmart, probably assume that would still be in the hobby. But anything that's an oddball or out of there, I could see them not allowing that, because how do you train a border agent who gets paid $20,000 to $50,000 a year? How do you give them a PhD amount of knowledge on what type of fish is which? Like, even ichthyologists can't tell the species apart if they're young, like if you have fry or something. And in the long run, I think it would actually harm the fish hobby pretty greatly and the fish ecology, because then you don't have any incentive to collect them other than black market. And what you can see what happens with black market is it's a gold rush, tragedy of the commons type situation where everybody rushes in, takes what they can of what's left because they figure it's going anyways, and they just speed up that process. But if it's not a threatened species, it probably just won't be protected and it'll continue to just exist. But the people, the 80,000 people, for instance, in South America who make money off of that, who make a living off of that, they're going to do gold mining illegally, or they're going to move coca paste or whatever it is that they need to do. When your kids are hungry, you don't care if that fish is endangered, I mean, you may a little bit, but not enough to not feed your kids. So, in the end, I mean, it's just such a poorly written law. That's the main problem. If they clarified things, or if they said, that anything that's threatened or endangered can't be imported, I would understand a lot more of that. But the whole, you can't even move a fish with you when you move your house to a different state, or any pet for that matter, reptiles too. Like, it just wasn't
birds,
well thought out.
It's pretty poorly written. Or have you talked about or kind of acknowledged like who sponsored it, like where it came from?
Oh yeah,
who financed
Marco
it?
Rubio. So good.
So we
old
know
Marco.
it's him, but have you talked about who like basically sponsored him to write that?
Well, so there's several people. I mean, there's also some conspiracy stuff that I can't confirm that I talked about earlier on. But I, with the disclosure that PJack is on it trying to fight it, who is kind of the lobbyist group for the fish hobby as a whole. But who pays that is Central Pet, and that's who pays them. Well, at the same time, PetSmart and Petco could have a lot to gain from that. And so they did contribute a lot to the Republican Party in Florida, where Rubio is. Now, a lot of people contribute to both sides of political things a lot of the time. But the interesting thing is that there are Democrats in Hawaii and Democrats in California, specifically one of the districts, and with Nancy Pelosi, that actually worked on some of the word, like one of out of the 6 pages, there's like a few paragraphs that verbatim, sentence wise, took structure from the bill that Nancy Pelosi and a few of the representatives out of California drafted 3 years prior. So I don't know if he just cut and pasted it or if they're in cahoots over this one issue. I'm guessing he copy and pasted it because right now not much is getting talked about between over the aisle. But yeah, it's very possible that Segrest and some of those other companies have already talked to Rubio and gotten the assurances that their business will not be affected. It's a big business. A new study just came out. I talked about this last week on one of the member things, but they just did a new study in Florida. Florida's fish farming industry was valued by the federal government at 23 million is all, because that was the wholesale price minus costs of operations, and that's how they figured it out for some reason. Well, now University of Florida did a study, and the lowest end was 173 million, and I think the high end was like 320 million dollar
Yeah,
industry.
23 million is a joke. Like,
Yeah,
that's
and
clearly not accurate.
that's just farmed in Florida fish, not counting imported through Seagrass, 5D, Imperial, Bio Aquatics, all those different places that are through Florida. So, I mean, yeah, a lot of people do think that it's larger companies wanting to kind of crack down on that. But for sure, it's definitely Rubio and, lawmakers on both sides, but the Republican lawmakers in Florida want to avoid having another Python situation. But the odd part is that their bill doesn't specifically say, like, let's target the plecos, let's target any of the species that are problematic. It doesn't list out, and it doesn't say, like, let's allow the ones that can't survive here or whatnot. So it almost feels like it's economically motivated far more than conservationally motivated, in my opinion.
Yeah, to me, it's like, I mean, if it goes through, it's I don't know. It's like Petco and PetSmart are gonna have like a field day. Like,
Yeah.
where else are you gonna get fish? So it's like, maybe is PetSmart sponsoring this? Is Petco or whoever their parent company is? You start getting into those kind of conspiracies, but
Well, and I found for a fact that they donated to Rubio. Both of them donated to Rubio's reelection campaign super PAC. It wasn't a ton of money though. Not enough to make this happen on its own, but it might be enough to, hey, write us in, like, okay, because whoever's the Secretary of the Interior gets to write this magical white list that there's no definitions of how it gets approved. It just says any fish that was imported by minimum quantities within the last year, which, by the way, that's going to be a year that we had the Rona virus still raging and world trade all messed up. So like pea puffers and scarlet batis and stuff, a lot of them didn't get imported nearly the numbers they would have normally. Or rocket killies or clown killifish coming out of or Congo puffers, whatever it may be. Like, there were some major trends that made it so it was not a normal year. So I don't, if you were trying to be reasonable about it, it would be within the last decade taking an average of the imported animals or the creatures that are on the market. But that's hard to quantify. And so they want to ban everything and then unban a small list of those things. And that's what's so, it's very, very government big brothery, because right now it's like hamsters, gerbils, guinea pigs, cats, dogs. I think that's all that, and farm livestock. That's all that's approved automatically. The rest is up to the Secretary of the Interior. So, which is also like, it could change, but by the time this all gets pushed through, but like, or doesn't, but if you look at the Trump administration, he had plenty of people, a lot of administrations, but the Trump administration was just a good example. There's a lot of people that are like the secretary of something that have never touched that subject in their life, have no qualifications, and it was a political favor as to why they're there. Like Betsy DeVos running the education you know, like Secretary of Education, and she has never been a teacher. She never managed schools or anything.
I think that's fair to say about all politics. I mean, they all hire their
That's what I'm
buddies
saying.
and give
Yeah.
them big paying jobs, but
Mhm.
that's all stupid.
There's some in there. You know, I would say that about Biden. It's true about Obama's administration also, but Biden actually kind of did the old school politician thing where you take those old crusty guys that have been waiting in line, you know, paying their dues, whatever that means. I won't be vulgar here, but you know,
Crusty old dude, that's perfect.
yeah, crusty old white dudes and a few token other people, and then you give them all the choice spots, and you know.
So if we bring this back to more of her question about conservation, do you think it basically would like shut down the Amazon Research Center, like all the conservation they're doing? Like, what's the point if they can't
Oh yeah,
monetize it, right?
right. Well, I know for a fact that Asia is growing like crazy, and the
I guess
Chinese,
that's true. Yeah.
the Japanese, I mean Germans, French, they're ahead of us in the hobby again now. You know, when you look at like the amount of species they have access to, and the I guess, you know, there honestly in America there's been a wave off and on throughout our history of anti-academia, anti-elitist educational systems and things. And I can understand that, like why you don't want to pay big dollars for the big name, and it's like a branding game, and you can get a good degree at a community college. I get all that, but there's almost been like now like almost like being smart is bad, like vibe that has like, or being smart means you're an elitist or pompous. And like I want the smart people to be working on problems. Like I think we're going to need them to fix some of the big problems in the world. But you also need like everyday logical people to keep them grounded. Like we all need to work together, you know. But
That's
yeah,
the
I
key
mean,
right there too.
I think that I mean it would continue, but definitely there would be a black market for the hardcore fish keepers. I mean, I know where you could find an arowana in Seattle right now.
An Asian
Uh,
arowana, yeah.
yeah, yeah, Asian ones, and they're going to cost you 5 to 10 grand. But I mean, you need to spend at least
Who's
that
your
much
Asian
on
arowana guy? Because I can get them for way cheaper.
the. Yeah, you know, actually, the shop that I used to live next door to, now I live like basically next door to Aquarium Co-op, but I'm like 6 minutes away if there's no traffic. It's bad for my freaking wallet, man. But I used to live next to this shop called Little Amazon that like knowingly got shut down because they had like all sorts of crazy stuff in there. And he had a whole back room that would be like locked. And then if he like trusted you, had seen you enough times, he'd be like, "Hello, my buddy, come back." And like he had like a goanna monitor lizard of some sort that was like 4 feet long back there, and he had an American alligator at one point. And you know, I saw it when I was younger, and I was kind of like, "Oh, that's cool." But then as I got older, I was like, "Man, that was kind of messed up. I wonder if that place is like that." And as I was thinking that, not long after, it was in the news that they had gotten like busted, and one of the owners had gotten in trouble for selling it was like arowanas and piranhas or something, because they're not legal in our state, the piranhas. I know they're legal in some states now, but yeah.
Yeah, so I actually replied to a Craigslist ad to buy an acrylic aquarium, and I went down to Seattle, and this guy was like, "Okay, come down in my basement," and I'm just like, "This is weird, but okay." And inside his basement, he just had like 2 to 300 gallon aquariums everywhere, just full of Asian arowanas. I'm like, I'm just some random dude on the street, and he's like, "Here's, I just emptied this tank. This is the one I'm selling." And I was just like,
Wow, that's
"Geez,
bold.
yeah." You didn't care at all. It was
Wow.
crazy.
I mean, it's one of those things where like most people would never know by looking, you know, even in the hobby, a lot of people wouldn't know by looking, like your average beginner. But there's a lot of people with strong opinions. So that's one of those things where there's definitely a secret culture in fish clubs too, where you like know there's a
Mhm.
couple guys that have got some weird species that they shouldn't have, you know. Uh And they'll tour the house, but they've got that special room or in their bedroom, or like you said, or in the basement or whatever. But I think you'd get a lot more of that with the hardcore fish keepers if they banned it. I don't think they'd have a way to enforce interstate trade though. Like
That would be so hard.
right now they're trying to stop one chemical, fentanyl, and they can't do that from stopping that being shipped in the mail. Like, how are they going to stop goldfish or whatever? They're not going to rip open every bag. Um, so there's this new technology that NASA figured out, and I think they were working with the International Space Station folks, like a whole like international thing. But they found a way to vacuum seal fish in what was the solution? It was a solution that was really high in oxygen and something else, but it was like a gel. And basically, you know how you buy like those camping meals that are like freeze dried and you like add water? They had a gel bag that they put fish in, and they could put them in there for like 3 or 4 weeks and then bring them back to like awake. They were like in suspended animation. And it's not every fish yet, but like they figured out how to do it with like a rice fish, danios, goldfish, like a number of pretty hardy fish, but guppies. And so they were talking about like, could this be the way in the future that we ship fish? Is like we just vacuum seal them in like this little thing and run them in a solution.
I'd say even if you're not trying to do it illegally, that sounds like the way to ship them. Like,
well, right, yeah. I mean, no, yeah. This article was just talking about like the plausibility of adapting that technology. Like how far out would that have to be? Because like they just figured out that they could do it. But yeah, basically they just like supercharge the fish in a tank with high amounts of oxygen and other vitamins and chemicals and hormones specifically, and then very quickly they like basically put it in this gel that keeps it like the same humidity. But it's so that they didn't have enough room when bringing fish up to the space station. They didn't have enough room to send them in a 10-gallon tank or whatever, So they could have either sent eggs or they could have sent full-grown fish. But since they wanted to see how eggs responded to being hatched up in space, they didn't have time to bring babies and grow them up from eggs. But that is why they brought rice fish to the International Space Station first. They brought that, and then actually the very first fish brought to space was the mummy chug minnow, which is out of Connecticut and Massachusetts area. But yeah, the mum chug or mummy chug minnow, they apparently can live at 4 times the salinity of the ocean, or they can live in RO water. So they can live at pH like 3 all the way up to pH 10. They're like the hardiest.
Melt at 3 pH. That's crazy.
Right? I know. Well, I mean, licorice gouramis, they spawn at 3.5 or so.
Yeah, I suppose that's true too. Yeah. It just seems crazy that
that's like my Coca-Cola
about that right low of a pH.
Yeah. Might as well put them in this bottle of Coke.
I mean, basically, yeah. They'd probably survive too, maybe. Well, actually, probably not.
Probably not in Coke, but they'd survive at that pH probably. I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's wild. And fish are okay. Like you can take a saltwater fish and put it in freshwater. Or wait, no, the other way around. You can put a freshwater fish in saltwater. Can't put a put a saltwater fish into freshwater. So there's certain ways you can do things too with pH. Like you can go from high TDS to low, but you can't go from low to high without killing the fish pretty easily, and pH too. But that's because like freshwater fish don't drink. They just absorb the water from osmotically through their gills and their skin, and well, not their skin, but through organs and glands by their gills. And then their cloaca, they let their waste solids come out. But other than that, water's just constantly coming out of their little waste hole. And then with saltwater fish, though, they actually have to like not consciously, but like their body has to like think about actually taking in water through the gills. And then they usually have a desalinization organ. that then filters that out. And so they drink technically, whereas freshwater fish don't drink. They just absorb it.
So, Dragon Lair says, I just learned that inverts don't show up on airport scanners.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I never really thought about it, but it's like, well, I guess that does make sense.
I mean, I would bet that a lot of fish wouldn't either because they're cartilaginous, you know, like when they're young, if they're not bone yet, or if they're sharks or rays, I bet they wouldn't show up either. I mean, it just depends. Those new fancy scanners, they'll see.
Yeah, I think they'd want to be like, why is all this liquid in your
right?
Yeah.
I constantly on my little news updates though, I see things like man straps 700 fish to thighs and then tries to fly out of Singapore, or like man puts 17 songbirds, you know, in his butt or whatever, you know.
Well, that's where the arowanas are coming out of. You know, they're strapping them.
Yeah.
Singapore.
Well, I mean, they caught another guy, and they only caught him because his buddies told on him, and he was swallowing these big old horse pills full of eggs, and then flying. So that's pretty hardcore.
Yeah, I also wonder like how many. Like if we were just to go up to British Columbia and buy some Asian arowanas and driving back over, like they don't search every vehicle, and even if they do, are they going to find an Asian arowana? And then
they wouldn't know.
Yeah, it'd be like, no, it's a Giardini.
Yeah,
like they're not going to know.
And they could probably even Google Giardini and be like, "Oh yeah, that looks basically like what I'm looking at."
Yeah, because a small Asian arowana looks like a small Giardini.
Yeah, it does. I mean, for that matter, you could be like, "It's a gar." You'd be in more trouble for that though. Then.
So I think I just came up with a new side hustle. You know.
I'm in.
For if you're getting like 5,000 for Asian arowanas, I mean.
Well, I have a feeling you have about 20 people that would pay that, and then no one else for a long time. You'd saturate that market, and then no one would want them. And it would be like all the loudmouth people. Probably half of those people would put them on like their
YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it wouldn't be YouTube. It'd be like TikTok, right?
Oh yeah, it would be TikTok.
It'd be like predatory life or something, you know.
Man.
I don't know how Catch 'em All Fishing is still on there, man.
All those Florida idiots, man. I just like. I hope Lucas doesn't turn into one of them. That's my only fear about him going to Florida, and I know he won't. But like,
he does have a lot of conspiracies.
Florida just makes people do some stupid stuff. I don't know what it is.
Ask him about chemtrails. He's real into that.
Oh, he's super into conspiracies. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Which I love myself a good conspiracy, but I love it for more of a. I like sci-fi, and to me, it's like sci-fi.
Yeah, they entertain me, but I don't necessarily like take it as canon. I do find it interesting. Like
my favorite, one of my favorite things to troll people with is to tell them that the Earth is flat. Like,
yeah,
it's just so funny how, and it's just because everyone gets so worked up about it. You know, it's just, I don't know.
It's one of those things too where people think like, hey, that's actually an area of science I know something about, like that I can say is wrong. Like I can pull the I'm smart card.
That's true. That's true.
You know, I was talking. Who was it that I was talking to the other day about it? Oh, so one of the guys. Speaking of the guys from Florida, this guy Andrew contacted me from Florida, and he was like, "Hey, our club's going to have a trivia night, but I don't have any questions, and I can't find any online about fish." So he was like, "Can you text me some? Like, could you come up with some?" And so, like, quickly I did it, and I started doing it, and I'm like, boy, I am a freaking nerd because I could do this all day. Like, like random crap about, you know, like, what's the Latin mean for this fish? Or this fish means armored helmet fish. And it's a small catfish that everyone loves, the genus. But in any case, like, so I wrote him, I don't know, 30 or 40, and he's like, dude, you should sell a deck of these. And I was like, I should. Like, so I'm trying to find someone.
That would be like something like that. I mean, that would be perfect for like Fishtoberfest, having like a trivia night.
Yeah.
Because, you know, part of the reason I don't really go to a lot of the shows is because they're almost all the same.
They're just like
Um,
self-indulgent, and like the commercial side of it, I don't give a damn about. So
yeah, me neither. And it's you see the same things at every show, and like, and being in the Pacific Northwest, like each show costs like $1,500 with
yeah,
airfare, and it's like I can't go to one of these every month, let alone
no,
like just a couple a year. That's so much money.
yeah,
So like if someone did something different, like trivia and it's actually fun stuff, like that would get me more involved than like, hey, come check out Marine Land's booth that you've seen 500 times. I
right.
don't care about at all.
I do have to say I like Seachem's little commercials. They're like James Bond ones or whatever. I thought those were kind of cute.
I don't know that I've seen them.
They're like it's like a spoof on James Bond, like old school James Bond, like Dr. Goldfinger or whatever, but or Dr. No and Goldfinger. But it's a woman who's supposed to be James Bond, and there's like this evil villain, and he's like, you know, I'm gonna keep your fish alive, like rather than kill them.
I
She's
know,
like,
like Fluval was putting out some just horrible content for a while, and it
oh
was
man,
like they had like gunshots going off and like stuff flashing. I'm like, what is going on here? But it made me
yeah,
watch it because it was just so bad.
yeah. About 4 years ago, they started like a channel that was just terrible. It was just boring, and they're like, so we're gonna set up a tank, and like before they could show you how to set anything up, they're like, so then I'm gonna use this product, and I'm gonna use this product, and you could substitute that with this product. It's like, oh God, I'll just read a catalog if I want this.
Well,
So
yeah. Well, then apparently they went the completely opposite way because I was like, you go to their channel and there's just stuff in this video. It's like I'm telling you, there's gunshots going off, there's stuff flashing all over the screen, and I was just like, what am I even watching? And the comments are great. Just
they're just like trying to traumatize like war vets or something is like their
yeah, it
new
was
thing.
pretty crazy. I don't know if they still do it because I'm like I watch a couple of them. Like, I can't watch the stuff anymore. It's too bad.
Yeah, I watched the Dennerley and the oh, what's the other one? The out of the Netherlands, the other, well, Tropica too.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
George Farmer's stuff that he does sometimes. The aquascape setups and things, but they're never on a good time for us, and especially in the Pacific Northwest. They're on at like 4 a.m.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's I don't know. It's an interesting thing. Like when you do YouTube long enough, you definitely know the things you could do that are going to get more views versus not. And you have to decide if it's worth it to get the views. Like if views is what you want versus subscribers is what you want versus money is what you want. Because you have all these people that are always contacting you once you hit a certain point that have some agenda or they want you to put their product up or whatever.
I'm sure. Yeah, I mean,
And
I don't even know how many emails I got just today. I
yeah,
got
and
I
a
got
lot of
three
them are
today.
like scams too, or like
Yeah, at least those are
this,
easy to spot though, because they can't
yeah, they're
spell
pretty
worth a
easy.
darn.
Yeah, you just look at the dot what? It's like it's not dot com, it's like dot SA, like dot South Africa, dot
Yeah,
Somalia, what? Like
exactly.
uh dot NG or whatever Nigeria is, I don't remember off the top
Yeah,
of my
there's a
head.
lot from the NG. Yeah.
Yeah. But I get a lot out of the Higer people. Always, always,
Yeah,
always.
I actually talked about them on my last stream because they're just always sending me stuff.
I'm like, sure, send it. Like, I'll try it, but if I hate it, I'm gonna make a video. I'm not gonna not make a video. I'm gonna make a video that's 15 minutes long about all the reasons I hate it. And he's like, "Pardon me, sir."
I know that's what's crazy is like they just assume you're gonna give them like, oh, you gave me this $10 air pump and I'm
Right.
gonna spend like days making a video, and it's just because you gave it to me for free, it's gonna be a positive video. No, if it sucks, it sucks.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I've been told like in a few cases, like we'll give you $500 to do a video on our product. You just need to cover all the things you like about it, and like it'll say, like that's like the little rundown email is like, at least four things you like about it, at least 6 minutes long or whatever, and show the product in like in frame and focus for 30 seconds. gotten a few of those, and I'm just like, are people doing this? Like, I don't know. It's kind of gross, but
Yeah, they definitely are. I mean, especially when you get that, that person that's been working on YouTube for like 5 years and they get their first email and they're like, oh yeah, $500. I'll say anything for that. That's more than
yeah,
I've made in 5 years on YouTube.
right. Yeah. Well, I mean, the YouTube has exploded in the last 3 years. I mean, it's exploded in the last 5 or 6 years, but it's really exploded in the last, like, since the virus started, really was when, like, man, the pet category went up from like whatever it was, 200,000 channels to like 700,000 or whatever. In if pets education and science, like if you put them on Social Blade, however they had it organized, but I was like, holy cow, like. So I feel like it would be very hard to start a channel right now. I mean, I like you said, I'm doing like 8, like some weeks I'm doing 6, sometimes I'm doing 8 pieces of content for members or for public or for live stream, however you want to do it. But I mean, I'm spending probably 40 hours a week easily on channel stuff. And I could see where you'd be really bitter if you didn't truly love that, like inside and out. You'd be
Oh, for
bitter
sure.
after a
Yeah.
couple of years of putting in the time, Um, but luckily, like this is probably what I'd be doing if there were no incentives. It'd be pretty similar, So, and I'd rather have subscribers and people in the community and channel like that actually like leave comments and have opinions and want to talk or debate like respectfully, and that will come and watch stuff, then like having one viral video. Like honestly, like I'll mention it briefly, but like when Joey and I got in our little tiff, I was like, man, if this becomes my top video, I'm gonna be so mad. Like
And it is.
no, it's not.
Okay, so I will say it's the first thing that pops up if you search your name in YouTube. Secret
Really?
history. It goes secret history living in your aquarium, king of DIY.
Oh,
So as far as like
okay.
search, yeah, that's
So
what I mean.
people probably went and searched it after that happened then too. Like those exact words, probably that might be the most searched, yeah. But I was gonna say like most views and most time, it's down there at like number 12, number 15 or something on my channel. So I was like, that's okay. But if it was like number 1, like by a mile, I was gonna be like, I just quit.
You definitely when you're playing the YouTube game, like when I was doing like 2 videos a week, it was one for me and one for YouTube. So
Yeah,
like the one for me was always like a vlog style hanging out in my fish room, and then the one for
yeah,
YouTube was a top X video. And
yeah,
even if I go look at my analytics right now, like the top 8 of 10 most watched videos every month are always top 10 something or
yeah.
top 5. And so
I know. It's what people want on the massive scale. But I want to reach with the channel, and it's been slow. Like granted, I know if I did more of those videos, I'd have more subscribers, but how active would the subscribers be? Like would they watch all my videos also, It's like if I want to get really nerdy and pick apart like the the way red blood cells carry oxygen in fish under ice, like no one wants to sit and watch that for 20 minutes unless they really care. You know what I mean? Like
mhm.
it's not a quick little dip into the subject. Like I do like going into the deeper dives, and I enjoy that content when I see it other places. Um, but I also feel like it's so elitist and exclusive sometimes that I want to just be like, hey, I'm just a dude. I'm just explaining it. Like just because it's a complex subject that we've had to like pick apart to understand doesn't mean you have to be all like, oh, you don't know the jargon. Well, you're not going to understand the concepts. And so I think
I don't
I
think
think
it's
that's been
elitist.
another.
I think you're like educators don't think they're elitist. I mean obviously some do, but as like a whole, like
Right.
then like I don't think educating means elitist, at least to me.
Not to me either, but there is a section of, for instance, people who give talks at fish clubs who have like 3 talks in 20 years, and they go to every club and they give one talk for 7 years. They hit every club, and then they do their other talk for 5 years, and then their other, and then they circle back around to the first one, and they get their thing at the end of the day. But it's almost like going through the motions versus someone who's truly passionate about what they're working on. And so I see there's that end of things that can be problematic, compared to people, or when they say like it's not allowed to be posted online because I wouldn't make any money coming to talk at events. And I understand that urge, but it's like it's the 21st century now. Like, I mean, things have really changed. If you're a one-trick pony, you probably need to do more than that. Like, but the hard part is that certain researchers, it takes 20 years to learn that hour-long speech worth of information that's special to them, and lots of funding and time. And that with the internet these days, we can take a lifetime of work and studies and condense it down to like a 20-minute video and be like, well, now we know how whales migrate or whatever. And for them, that was their life's work. And how are they going to monetize it? How are they going to like go and talk about it and stuff? So I get some of it, but it also becomes there's like a certain line that's hard to draw. It's different for everybody, but like where that becomes, I don't know, like gatekeeping or something along those lines too. But I guess the elitist factor, I would say, comes in when you watch like public education channels, or if you've ever been to a fish club and there's somebody who's an ichthyologist and you're like, hey, look at that tail fin on that fish, and they're like, it's called the caudal peduncle. Like that's where
those are the elitists. Yeah,
that's the like attitude that like some people obviously could be repelled by in education, I guess. So like, yeah, it's cool to know the words and use them if you can, but at the same time, like communicate whatever is the best way to communicate to your audience. So if it's a fish anatomy video, use the right terms. If it's just like, hey, look at this fish that's cool, say tail, whatever.
It's like when I was in IT, I couldn't go to my bosses that don't know anything about IT and be like,
right,
hey, and start stringing off, IP addresses and MAC addresses and just expect them to know what I was talking about. They wouldn't have a clue.
Yeah.
They'd be like, why are you working here? You're fired.
I did it when I was still pretty new into like re-entering the hobby, because I was into fish growing up, but not like I have been the last 6 years. It's been my entire like day and night is like something fish related comes on into my life. But like I did a video maybe 5 years ago now, it's 4 years ago, and it's called The Acronyms of the Fish Hobby. And I just wrote down as like someone coming into the hobby online, like black beard algae, baby brine shrimp, like BBS, beneficial bacteria, BB, multiple tank syndrome, MTS, Malaysian trumpet snail, MTS. So there were so many, and a bunch of them have multiple meanings. And I was like, wow, there really is a culture within the group. And even if that's not like an educational thing, it's like a slang thing for the hobby. And I feel like for a long time the hobby, and even though YouTube is newer, there's kind of been a disconnect in some ways between what's going down in the universities and the Discovery Channel and your local fish club. They're like three different worlds. And I feel like now we can start to like fuse some of the incredible, like Alex from Tank Tested, his channel, beautiful cinematography and drone shots of the Amazon and stuff. He was a videographer for Discovery and National Geographic at different points, an editor. And he doesn't do a lot of content like volume wise, but the stuff he does is like really beautiful, like a film. And then you've got people like Dr. Anthony now, who's starting to become more active on YouTube, and he does very, very educational, basically like what he teach in a 101 level class, or a 201 level class on fish. And then you've got the top 5 reddest fish video or whatever. But I mean, I think there's a place for all that, and like we can all kind of get along. Whereas I think YouTube has really had to work to get respect from that academic community or from the financial community. Like listen, we're the trendsetters. Your magazines, there's like 2 magazines in the hobby that anybody even remotely reads anymore for
Mm-hmm.
freshwater. Like it's all about YouTube or Instagram or whoever, like whatever social media is doing is what's going to set your trends. And honestly, they haven't valued it nearly high enough. If you look at the food industry, if you look at other, I mean, granted, that's a way bigger industry, but even proportionally, they, we're modestly a $3 billion in the U.S. a year industry. Fish keeping as pets, and some people say up to $10 or $12 billion a year. But at least 3 billion is like the lowest I've ever seen projected. And it's like a little slice of that. I mean, it's still a lot of money, it's still a lot of heads to turn and things like that. And yet you still get offered, like you said, a $5 made in China pump for changing the minds of 100,000 people that may watch or whatever,
That's
or
like,
see the fun.
I don't want to get too much into the YouTube side of it, but it's very frustrating because you go and when you explore like other niches, like automotive, like there's people with like, just a few thousand subscribers basically getting like free cars. Like it's like
Right.
so
Yeah.
opposite side of the spectrum.
Yeah. And I think a big part of that is that the hobby is a monopoly. Like those trade shows and stuff that have gone on for years, like all the companies, all the heads of the companies, they know each other and they think they have it down who influences who, and that there just isn't another choice in a lot of things. And I think a lot of people are coming in from China or Bangladesh or India with new products, and they're like, hey, guess what? Like Higer's a good example, like Fluval and Eheim and Hydor, those kind of brands used to think, oh, we're the top of the top. And now people are like, well, what if we just get a copy that's like made in China that's actually okay too? I mean, I don't mean to say this in a disparaging way, but like Aquarium Co-op, like he's doing the off-brand, like tweaking, what works best and making things over there, and then making them for cheap, bringing them over and selling them for relatively cheap, and you can still make a good product. Is like at the end of the day, you don't need to mark it up 100 times. And I think that's like in this hobby, it's been kind of an elitist hobby in the sense that it's a luxury and these things are expensive. And if you have to worry about your daily in and out expenses, you can't be hardcore fish keeper really. You could have a fish tank, but it's hard to have a fish room if you have money problems, pretty much, and so they
Yeah,
assume that
it's
you have.
expensive.
Yeah, I mean, it's they expect that you have an expendable income, and yeah, so I think that they also just expect that you'll pay whatever you're going to pay, and as a community, we have a voice and we have power, and when we organize and network and interact with each other, you can start to say like, no, we don't want to put up with that. No, we're not going to buy your crappy product or whatever, or yes, we
Well,
are going
that's
to
one
buy
of the
this guy's
reasons
product.
like that I have a lot of respect for Aquarium Co-op, like the company, not just
Sure.
Corey, but the company is
Sure.
that they went out and they're like, well, you're not going to do this. Okay, I'm going to do it myself and I'll show
Mhm.
you. And he sells more stuff than Petco does in the entire country. So
Yeah.
of certain products, mind you.
Sure.
And if we got more people like that shaking up the industry, I think the more the better, the more the merrier.
I agree, and I mean I agree with that, and I think that I like to see the true innovation though too, rather than like the new heater. Just gonna say it's a Higer heater, like which I like. I like that Higer heater or whatever, but it's like a basic built in China somewhere design that was tweaked to the specifications, and but things like where he really changed a lot of features on it. I feel like that I totally agree. Or like testing strips, the price of them, like way to go, like that's been
Well, one of the
BS.
things like this right here, I was actually just playing with this. The fact that this is wireless, like
Yeah, that's
battery,
cool.
like why wasn't that a thing like 10 years ago? And the fact that it can go months without needing a recharge, like give me a break. Like that's
Yeah, oh,
rad.
and the air pumps and stuff, like that's great. I mean, the thing is, I think there's a lot of these little off brands though that are trying to shake it up in Europe, in Asia, So if you went to InterZoo, you'd find a lot of air pumps that look suspiciously similar. You know what I mean? But I don't care. It's
Well,
not
it's
been
like going on
available.
Amazon and like the USB
Right.
air pumps. There's like 20 different colors of 20 different
Right.
manufacturers.
Or TDS meters or
Yeah.
whatever, But I mean, as long as it works well and, people are happy with it, then great. And it's not like price gouging, then great. I mean, I think that's good. And, my only problem I've had with any of the channels that sell stuff or that brand things, it's never that they do it. It's when they try to do it pretending to be a friend or like, oh, I'm just the dude next door who's in the hobby just like you. Where if they say, hey, man, and like Corey has been saying for years now, like, hey, man, I'm running a business. So
Yeah, since
I
his
got to
first
do it.
live stream, he's like, I'm here to promote my business. I think he says it in
Right.
his very first live stream. Like,
In his first
hey, as
live
long as
stream,
you're
really?
honest, like, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't care. Yeah. As long as you're honest, I don't care. And that's the bottom line, because then you know what you're getting into. And if you don't want to watch ads, then don't. But if you're like trying to get a better this or that and you are shopping around, then great. Plus, but I mean, like, his channel definitely taught me a ton. I remember I was trying to remember the name of the guy that he did the videos with. Was it not? It's not Elliot. I feel like it starts with an E though.
The what? The what now?
The
Lamont?
videos that Corey did with when he first started the channel, like 8 years ago, 9 years ago.
So he did videos in his first couple live streams with his old store manager, Lamont.
Lamont, that's it.
Yeah.
Lamont. Yeah. So a lot of those videos actually, like, I really like, those were the first ones I saw. And I was like, oh yeah, they're super educational. So from the get-go, I really liked what he was, like the teaching. And I feel like he was some of the first content out there to do that on YouTube. You had people like a lot of DIY type stuff, like Dustin and I even like Aqua Pros, but Aqua Pros got into a lot of science and stuff too. So I really liked, when he talked about like the
Yeah,
ammonia.
I miss when he I miss the Aqua Pros that wore his lab jacket and like
Yeah, that's
deep
what I mean. I
dived into
love that.
things.
I love that phase.
Because
And
he's
so that's
actually, I think he has like a master's degree in like in some
I think
biology
it's
field,
molecular or yeah,
something
biology or
crazy.
chemical
It's like,
engineering.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, he's a very smart dude. Mike is a smart dude. And like, or even Rachel O'Leary. I know she wasn't on that long, like time wise, but she'd been writing the nano fish book for working on it for years before she was YouTubing and coming to clubs to speak. So she was someone who I read her like blog and stuff for a long time before her YouTube. But I like to see that stuff and I see glimmers of things I like, and I'm just trying to I felt like with my channel I'm trying to take it to the far nerdy extreme and see what happens. But at the same time, like, hey, I'm just an average dude. I've had a crazy life. I've got a wife, a house. I've got the same problems everyone else does, plus some probably. And let's be friends. It's like I'm at the point now with the channel where I just hit 30,000 subs, and it's getting to the point where like I really try to answer every single person's question, and it's taking me like 5 or 6 hours a day to do that. And I'm like, I can't do it. So I had to like think, and I had this like existential, like, what am I gonna do when I've that asshole who can't, respond to people anymore because I'm too busy. But I don't really begrudge anyone for that, like, or never have. I get it, but I can definitely understand where, especially like a kid who looks up to you or something, may feel bummed out if you like half answer a response and then never get back to them or something. So
yeah, I know. I don't even read every comment anymore just because there's so much negativity out there.
sure.
But yeah, I definitely there's YouTube now sorts like the most, this person's commented on your videos the most out of anyone, or they're like a top
Oh
commenter.
yeah, that's a good idea.
So I do look for those, and I do look for questions, but I
Yeah.
browse so fast because I don't want to get sucked into negativity like I might have today. So I don't even want to say, but like I had, back before I was serious about YouTube, like this, like back in 2014, 2015, I was just uploading my own fish, right? like so I could
Yeah.
document him, track him. Like that's how everyone started YouTube, basically.
Right. Same thing. Yeah.
And someone actually commented on that video and like, you need to fix your audio. And I'm like, this is from like 2014. Like this is not, there's no audio. Like I'm just recording my fish. There's something playing in the background. And I was like, you need to fix your face. You know? So that's kind of the stuff I get sucked into every once in a while. But
Yeah, I get a lot of that too. Or like people will be like, man, you know, you've been doing this for 5 years and your audio still sucks. And it's on a video that's 5 years old. And I'm like, yeah, when I had 500 subscribers, some of my best videos numbers wise, like one was called like the 4 stages of shrimp pregnancy plus an update on my Endler. And it was just showing shrimp in every stage of pregnancy. It wasn't like an in-depth anything. So I just recently remade that video, very like going over it scientifically, showing sheds and the different ages, saddled, buried, whatever. But that video was my top video. And I'm like, YouTube, stop sending people to this piece of crap video. Like I kind of want to like make it private or delete it or whatever. But at the same time, I don't really like doing that with content as long as like it's not incorrect, you know?
well, here I am. I've been doing this for 5 years now, like actually trying. And I still have audio issues like at least once a month. I mean, my last video, the audio was terrible. So
It's rough, dude. Like you have to spend a lot to like keep up with the crap that goes wrong with that. You know, the software, the hardware, and then just the internet signal too. Like, yeah, I mean, I've been set up about like I am now, like the graphics, the quality you're seeing or better for the last 3 years. But I still just keep hearing people being like, "Oh yeah, you have that channel that's in like 400 pixels or whatever," and I'm like, what? Like it's like the myth has gotten bigger and bigger. I'm you know.
I definitely perpetuate that myth because now it's like a running joke.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's fine to joke, you know, whatever. But yeah, I usually don't have graphics up, although I am starting to do that more and more, where it's needed, you know. Like if it's a new fish being discovered, of course I should show you the new fish, you know. But you know what? I see that we're at a long point in here. We've been yakking a long time.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah, we hit 2 hours, and now we're kind of going off the rails. So I think it's a good time to end it.
Yeah, I'm just gonna jump off the train before it crashes. Yeah.
All right.
But no, thank you so much for having me, Bob. Always good. I always have fun watching your streams and chatting with you. And we're in the same area. If you ever want to go collect some hardscape or go fishing or whatever, you know where to get a hold of me.
If I ever make it to Seattle, definitely. I'm
in Shoreline now. I've made it out of the black hole.
True. That's true. I do forget about that.
I'm past the event horizon now.
Well, for anyone watching, his channel is in the description. If you want to check it out, I highly recommend it. Secret History Living in Your Aquarium. I did read everyone's super chat. Thank you for those. I appreciate it. And a couple new members. I appreciate that too. And for everyone just hanging out and commenting and lurking, I love you all. And we'll be here next week. We'll hopefully have you back on sometime, not next week, but sometime in the future, get you back
every week from now on.
Every week. All right. I'm going to hit this end broadcast button.